Thank you, Edmund. I knew I'd forget something. If we could begin by just asking you briefly to describe the events that took place that led to this.
Back in 2019, presumably.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So in 2018, 2019, I started becoming aware of what I later learned was the gender critical debate. I didn't know it was called that at the time, but that's now how I now understand it to be. And I'd always been aware that there were trans people, that there were men who thought they were women and acted accordingly, according to various stereotypes of womanhood. And I was also very aware of the protected characteristic in the Equality Act. That was fair enough. It wasn't something that I'd ever had to grapple with myself. I don't think that we'd ever had a trans identifying person in my workplace. Certainly my primary place of work, I owned, in fact still own, a business that employed around about 100 people on Immingham Dock, handling plant and machinery, bulk cargoes, etc. And as you can probably imagine, Immingham Dock is not the wokest, most cutting edge place on the planet. So I'd never actually had to grapple with the protected characteristic of having or intending to hold a gender recognition certificate. Nevertheless, having employed over 100 odd people, not once since 2010, when the Act came into being, was my company challenged on the basis of a breach of the Equality Act. And prior to 2010, the acts which preceded the Equality Act, we were never challenged on any of those either. So I consider myself to be a very good employer, in actual fact. And in 2018, I became aware that the trans debate there was a trans debate rather than just being trans people, and that this evolved around mainly males, not only claiming to want to live as a woman, but that trans women are women, substantially women. This offended my philosophical sense of what is what. I couldn't get my head around that notion, but more importantly, my wife saw this as a real threat to women. And what she said to me was that people won't start listening unless men start commenting on it. So I had a small Twitter account which I used mainly for football purposes, but I then started to sort of get involved in the gender critical debate. I had very few followers, less than 900. I was largely ignored. I would occasionally get a like, occasionally get a retweet, but I was an insignificant voice in the entire debate. All that changed in February. When was it? January, around about January the 22nd or 23rd. I can't quite remember. 2019. I was away from the office. I was at Tesco's. I'd done some shopping, and I got a phone call from the office, from my managing director there. He said, "H, where are you?" I said, "Oh, I'm just out and about." He said, "Oh, we've had the police here." I said, "Oh, right, that's interesting." And I couldn't think what we'd possibly done wrong, but I run a lot of plant and machinery, so it wasn't inconceivable that we'd breach some traffic law, or I had no idea. Anyway, and my MD said, "Look, I didn't give him your number, but I've got his number if you want to ring him back. It's entirely up to you, mate." So I said, "Yeah, I'll ring him." So I rang him, and it turned out that I was speaking to a chap called PC Mansour Gull from Humberside Police. And PC Gull asked me and said, "Are you Harry the Owl on Twitter?" And that sort of threw me initially, because I was not expecting this at all. And I said, "Yes, I am." And he said, "Well, there's been a complaint." I said, "Right, that's interesting." He said we've got 30 tweets here, which we consider to be hateful. Somebody's complained about, and I said, well, that's utterly bizarre. And they said, yeah, the person says that as you're an employer at the Port of Immingham, your place of work could be dangerous for trans people. At which point I just laughed, as though there were any trans people at my place of work. And I said, at this point, I let him know that I was an ex-police officer from Humberside, actually. And I said, look, how many tweets have you got? He said, oh, I've got 30 odd. I said, right. I said, are any of them criminal? He said, no, none of them are criminal. I said, so why are you ringing me? He said, because without intervention, this could escalate into crime. And I said, well, what crime? What crime could you possibly be talking about? And he said, Stephen Lawrence, murder of Stephen Lawrence. So I thought, well, this seems utterly bizarre. What could I possibly have tweeted which requires police intervention, and which without said intervention indicate escalation to murder? I just thought it was utterly bonkers. I said, so let's just get this straight. I said, I've not committed a crime. He said, no, none of them are criminal. I said, so which one in your estimation comes closest to being a crime? That if I'd just gone one step further, it would have crossed over the divide into criminality. He said, well, there's a limerick. I said, well, I don't write limericks. And he said, well, you retweeted one. And I thought, well, that's just ridiculous. And he said, having retweeted it, you endorse what it says. Now, the limerick, as it turned out, it wasn't a limerick. For starters, it was a piece of feminist doggerel. It was a lyric from a poet, singer called Ali B. And it said, your breasts are made of silicon, your vagina goes nowhere, and we can tell the difference even when you're not there. Your hormones are synthetic. Now let's just cross this bridge. What you have, you stupid man, is male privilege. That was it. That was it. I suppose not particularly nice if you're a trans person, but substantially true, and nowhere near the line of being grossly offensive, which I think is the only criminal act I think that would possibly even begin to cover tweeting such things. I said to the police officer, I said, right, so let me get this straight then. There are 30 tweets, none of them criminal. They said, yeah, that's right. I said, but you're a police officer. He said, yeah. He said, well, why are you ringing me? It's none of them criminal. He said, I need to check your thinking. And at that point, something just went off in me, and I said, "You've got to be kidding! You've got to be kidding me! Have you read George Orwell? George Orwell is a dystopian novel. 1984 is a dystopian novel. It's not a police how-to manual." And this reference, obviously, was entirely lost on PC Gull, who continued to use the term in reference to me as suspect, that I was the suspect. And that the person who'd complained about me was the victim, even though I'd not victimized anybody, and even though I wasn't a suspect to any crime. I then learned that what I'd committed was called a non-crime hate incident. I'd never heard about non-crime hate incidents, but I quickly became an expert in them. Non-crime hate incidents was set up by the College of Policing in 2014. And what they do is they took the 9 protected characteristics of the Equality Act and butchered them, and turn them into 5 monitored strands. So sex is missing. Sex is entirely missing from the monitored strands, even though Keir Starmer's CPS had done a report into crime against women in 2012, which showed a devastating amount of violence against women. Nevertheless, women were left entirely out of the monitored strands. And they butchered the characteristic of having a gender recognition certificate or seeking a gender recognition certificate. They turned that into this thing called gender identity. Gender identity being defined as something which you self-identify into. No reference to GRCs at all. We also further found out that a non-crime hate incident was any incident perceived by the victim or any other person to be motivated by hate towards any of the 5 monitored strands. Hate was defined as ill will, ill feeling, dislike, etc. It was just the most wide-ranging definition of hate you could imagine, and you didn't need a victim; you just needed perception of hate by the victim or any other person, including a police officer. And then bizarrely, the guidance said that no evidence of hate was necessary. So you didn't need an instance as such, you just needed perception. You didn't need any hate, you just needed the perception of hate. We thought this was absolutely, utterly ridiculous, illogical, and so open to abuse that we challenged. We challenged Humberside police who recorded the non-crime hate incident against me. And because they claimed that they were following national guidance, we challenged the College of Policing as well. And this ended up in a High Court hearing in, when was it? November 2019. And it was quite interesting that you couldn't get a fag paper between the College of Policing and Humberside Police at that time. The College of Policing said that Humberside had followed the guidance, and Humberside said that they followed the guidance. There was no sense of the College of Policing throwing Humberside under the bus. There was no sense of the College of Policing saying, well, in this instance, Humberside Police took it a little bit too far. They maintained that Humberside had followed the guidance to the letter, which is surprising given the result of the High Court hearing. The High Court hearing found that Humberside Police were entirely guilty of breaching my Article 10 rights and of creating a chilling effect by turning up at my place of work, by ringing me, by writing to me, and by recording the non-crime hate incident. But bizarrely, the College of Policing, who had set the guidance was found to be entirely lawful. So we had this bizarre situation where the guidance was lawful, but following it to the letter could result in the follower being likened to the Stasi, the Cheka, and the Gestapo, which is what Mr. Justice Knowles wrote in his very, very long ruling. We thought this was entirely illogical, and so we sought an appeal. That appeal was heard about 15 months later, and we won. We beat the College of Policing, and the guidance was found to be unlawful. So that was positive. Following that, the College of Policing issued new guidance, new approved police practice that came out around about a year later. I think it was in fact July or August of this year. And the Suella Braverman and the Home Office published statutory guidance as a result of my ruling, I think in February, March of this year. So fundamentally, we changed policing. Now, one of the things that we learned was that in 2019, there were around about 120,000 non-crime hate incidents recorded against individuals within England and Wales. We also found, and the College of Policing argued for this, that non-crime hate incident was disclosable on an enhanced DBS check. So if you were applying to work at a university, a college, a school, within the third sector with vulnerable people, then it was entirely at the gift of the chief constable whether or not they disclosed your non-crime hate incident on a DBS check. We found that to be draconian, entirely wrong, and it reminded me very much of a book I'd read about Berlin, behind the Berlin Wall, where in it I think it's Anna Fauder wrote the book. She speaks to a witness who said that they were a highly qualified linguist, and they would go along for various interviews, and the interviews would go incredibly well. and they knew that they were about to be offered the job, and then a week later or 2 weeks later, they'd be turned down. And it turned out that this was a result of a East German version of non-crime hate incidents. She'd refused to cooperate at one point with the authorities, and as a result, she was placed on a persona non grata file, which amounts to the same thing. If you look at the non-crime hate incident itself, what the record looks like, I have a copy. It says crime report. That's the first thing. It names the person as the suspect. It says that the occurrence was a crime of hate, and then in the subtext in the T&Cs down at the bottom, it says type crime non-crime. Now, you look at that piece of paper, and any employer, a potential employer, is not going to read the T's and C's at the bottom. They're going to see crime, hate, and that's that. That's that. Your application is going to go straight in the bin. So we discovered, as I said, there were 120,000 of these which had been liberally scattered amongst the population. We think that had risen by the time of my hearing to around about 250,000, somewhere in that region, between 200 and 250,000 of these non-crime hate incidents, which places a mark of Cain, if you like, on people. They may or may not know they've got one, and without going through judicial review, there was no possibility of having them expunged from your record. My Faircop co-founder, Sarah Phillimore, she discovered that she'd got a non-crime hate incident recorded against her for saying, "My cat's a Methodist." She seriously, with Wiltshire Police, she challenged this, the logic of this, the reasonableness of this, and the author of the National Hate Crime Guidance, Paul Gianassi, OBE, intervened and said that Wiltshire were entirely correct to record a non-crime hate incident against Sarah Phillimore for saying, "My cat's a Methodist." That's where we were at. That's where we were at. As I said, there needed to be no reasonable grounds. All there needed to be was perception, and it got worse than that, because the guidance also said that challenging the perception of somebody was a secondary case of hate. So any police officer going, "Are you sure?" that would also be recorded as a hate incident for not believing the perception of the so-called victim. That's how crazy it was. So we're very, very pleased to get non-crime hate incidents declared. They weren't declared unlawful per se, and we never asked for them to be declared unlawful per se. What we said was that for a non-crime hate incident to be recorded by the police, one, there had to be a specific incident, and there had to be a direct line of sight between that incident and crime, not an imaginary one. So if you were collecting intelligence from people who you believe were about to commit a traditional crime, a proper crime, then of course it's perfectly reasonable to collect that information and hold it, even though there has not yet been a crime. There have been incidents, but they're not yet criminal. That's perfectly reasonable. What we said was that recording non-crime hate incidents against people who had merely expressed an opinion, a political opinion, or an ideological opinion, or a religious opinion, which somebody found subjectively offensive, was not a reasonable ground for recording a non-crime hate incident. So we're sort of happy with that, with the current state of affairs as it stands in the APP, the current college policing approved police practice. What we have found is that this has not been disseminated particularly effectively to chief constables and police officers on the ground across the country. So police forces are still recording non-crime hate incidents. What my ruling has done is make them eminently challengeable. The second we challenge, they fall. The other thing that has happened, which is even more alarming, I predicted this when I wrote about it in The Critic about a year ago, is that the police would not back down, and having had their preferred option of non-crime hate incident taken away from them, what they would now do is escalate the inquiry into a criminal inquiry, and that is precisely what is happening. So people who would previously have been dealt with by an NCHI are now being invited to, they're now being required to attend voluntary interviews. Get your head around that one. In relation to Section 127 Communications Act. And of course, this goes nowhere because they've never got the grounds for a criminal conviction or a charge or anything. But nevertheless, the process has become the punishment. Someone who is required to attend a voluntary interview, who is interviewed under PACE caution for a hate incident, they will forever have to say, when asked, have you ever been interviewed for hate? And the answer is yes. The answer is going to be yes, isn't it? You can't put that genie back in the bottle. So what we greatly feared, in fact, has come upon us, which is that the police have doubled down and escalated. So this is really quite worrying. I've been dealing most recently with a lesbian from Newcastle who was required to attend a voluntary interview by the police for stuff that she'd said on Twitter. She rang me before she was supposed to go and have this interview. I said, look, have you said anything that is well dodgy? She said, honestly, Harry, I don't think I have. I really don't think I have. I said, well, let me just open up your timeline to me so I can have a look through your Twitter account. And honestly, I couldn't find anything. I couldn't find anything at all. It was all Newcastle United love. It was all football tweets. I couldn't find anything. Anyway, she said, look, regardless, they want me to come in because I said, I have tweeted about gender critical stuff. I can't remember what I've said, but I haven't said anything nasty, and I've certainly not targeted anybody. I said, well, I believe you. I said, so have you got the name of this police officer? And she said, yes. So she gave me the name of the police officer, and I rang the police officer directly. I said, hello, my name is Harry Miller. I'm from Faircop. Before you, I understand that you want to interview my client under caution. I said, a number of things I want to say before you go down that route. One, this better not be her you better not be investigating commentary on Twitter about the trans debate. And said, two, there better be an actual victim. You better have somebody who she has actually targeted rather than these simply being tweets, generalized tweets. And I said, have you considered the Miller ruling? And he said he hadn't. I said, right, I will send you the Miller ruling. I said, have you considered the the new APP? And he said, no. So I said, all right, I will send you that. And have you considered the statutory guidance? And he said, no. I said, right, to make it easy, I will send it you all. He said, right, great, that's fantastic. I said, if you still want to interview my client, then she will come into a voluntary interview next week, but with me. And he said, right, that's great. What days are you available? And I said, I'm available any day except Tuesday. He said, right, I'm going to go talk to my supervisor, but thank you for that. So I sent all the stuff, and then I thought, oh, that'll be the end of that. So 2 hours later, I got a phone call from my client who said the police were at her door, 2 of them, and said that they'd read the Miller ruling, and the Miller ruling stated that she would have to come in to be voluntarily interviewed or she would be arrested, which I thought that's a very strange reading of my ruling and the APP, etc. Anyway, she agreed to go in because she was worried out of her mind. She gave a no comment interview. But we got a tape. So because she wasn't arrested, she was able to take a phone in, and she secretly recorded the interview, which she then sent to me, and which I transcribed. The first thing that was notable about this was that she was reminded that she was there voluntarily, but if she chose to leave, she would be arrested. So again, we have straight up coercion there. And then the police officer went straight into the evidence and said, "Are you so and so on Twitter?" She no comment. And then the first question was, substantial question was, why do you feel the need to go on social media? Well, that's not a valid question from a police officer. The ECHR makes it very clear we're able to gather and meet with people without any interference whatsoever from the authority. And then they got into the substantial issue of there were apparently 10 tweets. The first one was that she'd separated the LGB from the T. In a bio, it said LGB rather than LGBT. And they said, do you not think that this could be seen as offensive? Not grossly offensive, which is Section 127 of the Communications Act, simply offensive. No comment. She said that you put here, this is your daily reminder that trans women are men. Do you think that could be seen as grossly offensive? Offensive, not grossly offensive. No comment. And they were all like that. They weren't even in the foothills of the tweets that I'd done in 2019. They were utterly innocuous, absolutely innocuous. The fact that she put she, her as part of her Twitter bio was seen as offensive. Now, at the end of the interview, there was a duty solicitor there, and at the end of the interview, the police said, right, is there anything else you'd like to say? And the duty solicitor said, I'd like to say something. And he said, look, he said, quite frankly, this interview could be seen as a breach of my client's Article 10 rights. And we're thinking, great, he's about to get stuck in here and give them what for. But then he says, however, I've told my client that in this day and age, everything is offensive, and that I've advised her that she mustn't ever go on Twitter and tweet like this again, which I thought was utterly outrageous because the solicitor was doing the work of the police for them. Again, as following this, because she'd been interviewed by the police for a hate crime, Newcastle United then banned her for 3 years for breaching their ground regulations. And it turns out that Newcastle United were classed as the victim. It was Newcastle United who reported her to the police and breached GDPR by giving the police her membership number and her personal details, private details, in order to go and have her subject to an interrogation. So this is what I mean by the police have not backed down. What they've done, they've purposefully misread Miller, and their response is to escalate rather than back away.
Okay, thank you, Harry. I'm going to stop you here because we're moving away from your case, I think, although I see the bearings that you're
well, that's what I've just said. That is a direct consequence. It's a negative consequence of my case.
Yeah, no, that is extremely interesting. I've just got a few sort of nitty-gritty questions, but just want to start with, which is slightly unrelated, perhaps. I mean, what you're saying, in effect, is that the non-crime hate incidents are giving people a criminal record. And I'm just wondering, would that have been subject to spent convictions? So that would drop from a person? No, it wouldn't. That would have been there for all time, would it?
No. The recommendation was that it stayed on your record, I think, for 7 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, this thing, it wasn't a criminal record. It's this bizarre notion of a non-criminal crime record.
Yes, I know, but I'm just saying the effect of it is, in fact, to give someone, to all intents.
It's a de facto criminal record, yes.
Criminal record, yes. Okay, no, that is interesting. Okay, can I just ask you a few questions just to set the background for yourself before we sort of dive in here? You were a police officer from when to when?
In the late 80s, early 90s.
Okay.
So my being a police officer is almost incidental. It's the thing that the media picked up on, obviously. And what being a police officer did, it gave me a real grounding and understanding of what a crime is. A crime, and back in the day, we learnt definitions by heart, and we learnt points to prove. If we ever went into an interview, we had a little book called Points to Prove, and you would have a very clear idea of what the crime was and what the points to prove of that crime were. And it seems to me that that skill has been lost amongst the modern crop of police officers who don't seem to understand what an offence is, for starters, don't seem to understand what a crime is, don't understand what evidence is, and don't take care with the points to prove. So yeah, and I've also had I've always enjoyed law. I was a CIPD member. And I was very, very good at law. One of the reasons that we stayed out of trouble through all the years of running a business is that I will always remain very hot on law. It's as simple as that. The thing about being an ex-police officer meant that I wasn't intimidated, not remotely intimidated, because I know what police officers are like. I'm also from a family of police officers, so the mystique wasn't there.
Okay. Why did you actually leave?
I wanted to make some money and be my own boss.
That sounds fair enough.
Yeah, I was never very good at being bottom of the pile.
Mm. Okay. Did you at the time that you had the visit from the police, did you still have relationships with some police officers, or
No, not. Well, I did, but not the police officers who I was. They'd all retired. But
okay?
I was friends with a number of police officers. Yeah, I mean, I say I've got family in the police force.
Mm. But you'd clearly not come across PC Gull before.
No. PC Gull was a neighbourhood community policing officer. Apparently a very nice guy, but not the brightest spark in the bonfire. And unfortunately, this is where a lot of neighbourhood police officers are drawn from. People who are nice, but not particularly great officers.
Mm. What was he? I'm just wondering if there was a sort of strong LGBT group within Humberside Police, and was PC Gull a part of that?
No, he wasn't. He wasn't necessarily part of that, but there was a very, very strong LGBT influence at the time. The PCC had LGBT stuff all over his office. They marched in the Pride marches at the time. They were Stonewall champions. So yeah, they'd taken the rainbow juice and drunk it fully and with great enthusiasm. I'm happy to say that since my ruling, it's now completely the opposite. We had a new PCC 3 years ago who's not remotely woke, and I developed a very good working relationship with the chief constable, and they got out of Stonewall and they got out of Pride. And the last thing he did before he went on to join the Her Majesty's Inspectorate this summer was tell his officers that they should never march in Pride in uniform and be identifiable as police officers. So it was a great result. But at the time, they were one of the wokest, most LGBT forces in the country.
That is interesting. Are you yourself a Christian?
I am.
Well, okay. What denomination are you?
Baptist.
Okay. So did you feel that this was influencing your views at all?
Well, yeah. I mean, as a Christian, yeah, of course, it was influencing my views. I mean, he did not know that I was a Christian. So there was no sense that I was being singled out as a Christian. But of course, my Christian faith and belief. So that's what I was saying. Philosophically, I had such a problem with this notion that trans women are men. Ontologically, from an ontological and Christian point of view, it makes no sense at all. It's saying up is down. It just doesn't work. I'm more than happy to accept that there are human beings with psychological problems who think that they are something which they are not, but that does not mean that they are that thing. That is just my starting point, and it's reality based, it's philosophy based, and it's Christian based.
Okay. I was just wondering if it was ever said in your defense that you had an absolute right to express your Christian views and that this too is a protected characteristic, and if this was given any credence by the
Not,
police force at the time.
not to that. Well, two things here. One, I wasn't the one defending. Well, at the court, they were the ones defending themselves. Of course, I wasn't. I was the aggressor,
Yeah.
and they were the defendants. Now, since then, I, from February 22 until very recently, I was a subject of a campaign by a Leicestershire police officer who singled out my faith, who referred to me as God's cop, that I was funded by the right-wing Christian groups in America, and that I was bizarrely running a terrorist organization with Suella Braverman.
My goodness.
There you go. And I went, when I complained to Leicestershire police, I did say that this was very clearly an attack on me, at least in part because of my protected characteristic of religion, that I'm obviously a Christian, and it was at least partially my Christianity that he was going at. It took us until November of this year, but that office has now been dismissed.
Okay. Just one more question before I invite other people to ask them. You said we, when the charges were first brought against you. Who was we at that point?
We. Did I say we?
You did. You said we decided to challenge in various ways. So who?
Right. Okay, right. Yeah. So I know what I'll be referring to. So in 2019, January 2019, February 2019, I went from having very few followers, 900 followers, to having several thousand followers, and being something of a poster boy for this whole police nonsense. And as a result of that, myself and one or two others got together, including police officers, and we set up a group called We Are Faircop. So when I use the plural we, I'm talking about Faircop.
Okay, thank you. I think I might like to explore this again later, but for the moment, Robert, would you like to come in here?
Yes, thank you. Hello, Harry. I would like to ask you, I imagine you're currently in contact with serving police officers as opposed to former police officers. Would that be right?
Yeah, I am. In fact, I had a very interesting meeting with a group of officers from the northwest of England, female officers, just a couple of weeks ago. They're setting up their own gender critical police network, support group, etc. What's interesting is how much they are being policed by their bosses. Whilst the LGBT police network runs entirely independently of any scrutiny whatsoever, the GC network is being scrutinized to the nth degree. So yes, I am in contact. There is some resistance, but it's not easy.
Are you aware of any current serving police officers who have faced similar problems to yourself, either with regards to gender critical views and their expression, or Christian views more generally? Yeah,
both. I've worked with a number of officers who have been scrutinized, bullied, intimidated, taken through disciplinary or threatened with disciplinary because of their gender critical views. Because, I say, whilst you are actively encouraged to fly the rainbow flag and to say trans women are women and bring your whole self to work, if your whole self is gender critical and you bring that to work, you're scrutinized and very quickly shut down. So we've been dealing with that. From a Christian point of view, I've been working with a police officer from Humberside, actually, a very experienced traffic officer who's been put through the mill because he was out on a patrol on a patrol in his car with a very good friend of his, actually, someone who he trained, and he just happened to say, "Oh, where's so and so today?" And the other guy said, "Oh, he's on an LGBT network course." And he said, "Oh, what a load of rubbish that is." And his mate reported him, and he was put through the mill and told that he would face disciplinary unless he went on a re-education, internal re-education course. So yes, he's a Christian, and he said, "But I believe that men are men and women are women. It's as simple as that. Human beings cannot change sex." And they told him that view did not align with the values of the force. And was invited onto a re-education course. That was this last year.
Right. When you say, can you just clarify one point? When you say you've worked with these police officers who are currently serving, you're talking about in your role as running Faircop. It's not about your past when you served as a police officer.
No,
we're not talking about those, are we?
It's right, yeah. Faircop. Faircop is, I think, it's fair to say the leading voice on this issue. In fact, someone would say it's the only voice that directly addresses police issues. So as a result, we get an awful lot of police officers contacting us, giving information and wanting help.
I have one other question. On your website, you publish an open letter which was sent to the head of the CPS, although the office holder has now changed, I understand. And in that letter, you go into a lot of detail about a number of things, one of which is the CPS employs certain advisors who are themselves trans individuals.
Yeah.
And one is known as a speak out champion.
Yeah.
And you express concerns about the CPS's ability to be impartial when it employs individuals who have sent tweets, and you cite some examples of the tweets which are quite derogatory towards certain public figures, including the Prime Minister. Can you just give us an update, because you haven't published any response from them, and I'm imagining you haven't received any response. Can you?
They've sent us a very bland response, saying that because of GDPR concerns, they're not able to advise us on who is in fact advising them. So we're now consulting with barristers to work out what the next step is.
But these particular advisors, are they, to the best of your knowledge, are they advising the CPS about its internal workforce, as you do cite in your letter, or do they have influence over questions of whose alleged offences need to be prosecuted, etc.? What's their remit exactly of advice?
Well, one we don't know. We don't know. That's part of the problem. We don't know the extent of their influence. But what we would say is that looking at the output from the CPS, you've got to question that gives you some indication as to the input. When people like Sophie Cook, who is, I think, their standout champion, if I remember correctly, they are an utter zealot. They are being offensive is an offence. Pronouns are a human right. They advocate all of this, and what we're finding, of course, is that the police are going down this route, and there's always been the thought that the CPS would block prosecutions, but I don't think they are doing. When you have this sort of malign influence, this ideological, political malign influence within a government organisation, CPS, then that's got to be incredibly dangerous. That's got to increase the likelihood that something which would not ordinarily have been prosecuted would now be prosecuted. I can give you an example. It's not a trans example, but it's a Black Lives Matter example. in around about a year ago, right, almost the day, there was a prosecution in York against a person because he'd written a letter to the FA, and I've got a copy of the letter, and the letter it is rude, and it questions Gareth Southgate's choice of squad, choice of players, and asks, is he choosing them on the basis of their ability or on the basis of something else? He asks why players were taking the knee to Black Lives Matter, which he describes as a Marxist communist organisation. He then asks the question, why did the players never take the knee for the victims of the grooming gangs in Rochdale and Rotherham? He calls Gareth Southgate soy boy Gareth Wokegate, which I just think is funny. And he finishes the letter with the simple word scum. Now, none of that is nice. None of it is nice at all. It's not a letter that I would be proud to have written. But is it criminal? I don't think it comes even close to being criminal. Piers Morgan called people scum on national television not long ago. Calling Gareth Southgate Gareth Wokegate is just funny. And it's absolutely, it's true that Black Lives Matter is a Marxist communist organisation. Nevertheless, he was prosecuted by West Yorkshire Police and found guilty by the magistrate in York. So we have very clear evidence that there is CPS influence. That the CPS are being they're being guided by queer theorists, woke theorists, etc. And if you look at the judicial bench book, which I would encourage you all to have a deep dive into, it is incredibly biased in favour of LGBTQ causes, and it takes a definition of racism which you and I would not recognise. Basically, it says that a racist is anybody who is not anti-racist. So racism is no longer about judging people on the colour of their skin or whatever. Racism is about being not anti-racist. It's not about actively going out and recognising your white privilege and our evil colonial history, etc., etc. Have a look. If you've not looked at the judicial bench book, you really, really should, because it's terrifying, absolutely terrifying.
I just have one other question about your letter that you spoke about. You mentioned the possibility, I think, that if there isn't a satisfactory response from the CPS, you would be considering judicial review.
Yeah.
Can you give us an update on the possibility of that happening at some point in the future?
Yeah, there's a possibility of that happening. What we're hoping to do is we're getting involved. We're taking legal counsel because whilst we're pretty good, and Sarah's I'm pretty decent, and Sarah's a barrister. She's a family law barrister. We need a public law barrister to look through this and write a pre-action letter to the CPS. But that's what we're currently looking at doing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert. Simon, what questions do you have, please?
Morning, Harry.
Morning.
Obviously this disturbing trend affects everybody in society, but are some groups more susceptible than others, and in your experience, and which ones are they?
Well, I think any government. All I can say is that the government bodies, quasi-government bodies like the police, CPS, the judiciary, they're the ones that I'm focused on. Anecdotally, I thought you just have to look at how many firms are Stonewall champions, how many firms are organisations raise the flag, recognise these made-up trans days of remembrance and trans history months and pride marches. You see the proliferation of pronouns in bios and the encouragement of that. it seems to be all over the place, and I think the hope lies in the fact that whilst there is passive acceptance of it, nobody actually believes it.
Yeah. What I wanted to really, perhaps didn't make myself very clear there, but what I was really asking is you mentioned, for example, a woman from Newcastle who is lesbian. I mean, are lesbian women, for example, more susceptible to become victims of this kind of ideology, or Christians? And
I think weirdly, lesbians and Christians find themselves at hand in hand at the bottom of the pile, because you're fine if you're a lesbian and you embrace the T, the trans thing, then you're the right type of lesbian. If you do not embrace the T, then you're the wrong kind of lesbian, and you're the worst kind of a lesbian. And it's exactly the same with religion, I would say. It seems to me that if you're Muslim, you can get away with a hell of a lot more than you can if you're Christian. So religion is a protective characteristic providing you're Muslim. If you're Christian, not so much.
Okay, so this is redefining feminism as well, because the only feminists who are acceptable are feminists who would accept the trans agenda.
Sorry, I missed that. Say that again, please.
So this would also redefine feminism, wouldn't it? Because the feminists, the only acceptable feminists are those who accept the trans ideology.
So first wave and second wave feminists are the wrong type of feminists. Hence, we have the acronym TERF, Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminist. There's the feminism which beardy blokes, not me, not this beardy bloke, but the beardy blokes seem to love, that Sadiq Khan seems to love, that thinks that everything can be solved by going, mate, at your friend. And then there's the proper feminists who recognise that violence against women is based upon their genetics, based upon their body, their physicality, their physical weakness, a lack of strength alongside the male of the species. So that is much more, that is biologically based. But of course, basing your worldview in biology is akin to Nazism, because that's what Hitler did apparently. So that's where the argument goes, that we are somehow biological essentialists, which is precisely the basis of Nazi ideology.
So listening to you earlier, you describe how in some ways things are getting worse with the police driving these cases, escalating these cases into criminal cases, these non-violent hate cases. But then at the same time, you say that we're now getting non-woke PPCs.
Homicide has got a non-woke PCC. Lisa Townsend, who is down in, is that Surrey? Wherever Brighton is, anyway. That's Surrey.
Sussex,
Sussex, that's right. Yeah. And there is the Hampshire PCC as well. The Avon and Somerset PCC is borderline gender critical. I mean, he is gender critical, but he's just treading a little bit carefully.
And you've also got some good chief constables coming through as well, haven't you? In places like Greater Manchester and
the Greater Manchester chief constable is excellent. Mr. Watson, that is, isn't it? He's great. Although Manchester is also a hotbed of LGBT police. That's where the LGBT police, the National LGBT Police Network, is based.
Right.
So, although we Faircop have been successful in having the public face of the National LGBT Police Network shut down.
Oh, well, congratulations. So do you envisage a time when TERFs and Christians and lesbians might be sent to jail for the crimes? Or is that still hanging in the balance?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think that's inevitable. I think it's coming. Well, it's not inevitable. It's not inevitable. I think the harder we fight, the less likely the chance that this is going to happen. This is why Faircop is so aggressive. I mean, I don't know if you follow what we do, but we are.
I do.
We are very aggressive. We are very in your face, and we do that quite thoughtfully. Actually, we do it to show that we're not scared, to give other people courage, and to make chief constables and police officers aware that we're a force not to be messed with, and that we bite, and that we'll bite really, really hard. Well, for instance, when I got arrested a year, 18 months, what was it, 15, 16 months ago, defending the Royal Green Jacket veteran in Hampshire, I was arrested for unlawful obstruction. My argument was that the crime is unlawfully obstructing a police officer in the lawful execution of their duty. What I said was that police officers were not lawfully executing any duty whatsoever, and therefore the force that I used to stop them was proportionate and necessary. So, of course, the Hampshire Police eventually conceded that I had a case and invited me to put in a claim for compensation. Now, I think I was held in the cells from arrest until release. It was around about 7 or 8 hours. And there's a scale of charges for unlawful arrest and detention. So I worked that out. I think it's like £1,000 for the first hour, then 300 quid for every hour after that. So I worked that out. I then said, okay, then there's the public humiliation, because all of it was live streamed on Facebook. Now, the fact that we were the ones who created the live stream and the cameraman was utterly irrelevant. So I charged them, I think, 1,000 quid for that. I then charged them for my time at so many £100 an hour. I charged for that. And then when I was in the cells, I was told that I was asked, will you give us your DNA and fingerprints? And I said, no chance. They asked me again, and I said, no chance. Then around about 12:30 at night, when I was getting quite tired and I wanted to get out the place, they came and said, look, Harry, we're going to release you, but we're going to have to take your DNA and fingerprints. And I said, right, okay, what happens if I say no? And they said, right, straightforward. We call down some colleagues from upstairs and they hold you down. We take your fingerprints and we pull out a chest hair from your chest for your DNA. And I went, okay, then I'll give it voluntarily. So again, being a police officer, an ex-police officer, remembering my definitions, I thought, well, this was theft, because they've taken my DNA. I can't get that back. That is my personal property. They had no lawful reason for taking it, and they took it anyway. And they took it under immediate threat of violence. They said they would pin me down and pull out my chest hair. And these people have got tasers, clubs, guns. So I thought, this is armed robbery. This fits the definition of armed robbery, in that there was a theft with the immediate threat of violence, with somebody carrying a weapon. So I put in for armed robbery, and I got that as well. I claimed 50 quid off them for armed robbery. Now, that's what I mean by being aggressive and fighting back. So I think I took £6,500 off them. Now, when they wrote to me, I was representing myself, and there was a line in there that said, and legal costs. So I rang my mate up, who runs a law firm in London, and I said, dude, cut and paste my letter, put it on your letterhead and send it to them, and then charge them. So we did that, cut and pasted my letter, sent it to them, and charged them 1,800 quid for the privilege. So it cost them, almost not far short of £9,000.
Right.
That's what I mean by being aggressive. Had I gone to a lawyer, they said the maximum you'll get is 2,000 for the unlawful, and I just thought, I'm not having that. I'm going for the jugular here, and that's what we do. So Faircop is incredibly aggressive.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're working at the level of the courts and directly with police force on behalf of your clients. What work do you do with government? I mean, I would have thought you would have had an ally with the last Home Secretary. I mean,
we did.
Why couldn't we get this stuff stopped?
We've had a couple of meetings with Suella Braverman, and we had a direct line to the Home Office until the recent shake-up. Now we have nobody. James Cleverly has not got in touch. I don't know anybody as yet in the Home Office who we can directly, write to. So that's a bit of a downer. But it'll come good. We'll eventually find people, and we'll eventually get more meetings with the Home Office, I'm sure. But yeah, it's a shame. I was sorry to see Suella go.
Well, one last question is you must have people contacting you all the time saying this has happened to me as well, or I've been badly treated. I mean, you see it almost on a daily basis. Are you logging these cases, and so at some point you might be able to do some kind of analysis about how many people have complained to you and what the case, how many violations of the law.
No, no. To be fair, we'd have to go through. So Faircop is run by me, Sarah Fillmore. We're just volunteers. We have no bank account. We have no money. We have no support. So we haven't done. No, it would be we'd have to go back through our memory banks, but. We're contacted every single day by somebody. I mean, sometimes it's stuff that has got nothing to do with us. You know, people saying, "Oh, the police burst into my house at 2 o'clock this morning and found a load of heroin down the back of the sofa. I didn't put it there. What are you going to do about it?" And we're going like nothing. It's not what we do.
Yeah. Okay, well that's great. Unless there's anything else you'd like to add.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Simon. A couple more questions for you, Harry. I'm wondering, have you had any, or what kind of interaction have you had with the Christian Police Association? Had they given you support, or with police force chaplains, or I don't know, the Catholic Police Guild? Or have you had any support from Christian groups within policing?
No, absolutely none whatsoever. We've had individual Christians who've got hold of us, as I say, but no formal approach by any Christian police group. No.
That does seem quite extraordinary, really, because I think, you know, the obvious point to make is if those tasked with upholding and enforcing the law in our nation are so ideologically persuaded that they only take one stance, you know, it is the who does police the police that we're actually coming to here. And if the Christian voice that is supposedly an entity within the police force is silent, that is in itself worrying. Do you think there is an issue here that you know, a wider issue that's affecting the police force at the moment? That they are so ideologically dominated that they have in effect given up on their proper role of enforcing without partiality the law for everyone.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. I mean, we talk about the chilling effect that the police create amongst the general public, but the chilling effect, of course, it starts with the police forces themselves. Officers are absolutely terrified of expressing any counter opinion. Particularly, as I said, there's this thing called positive obligation. You have a positive obligation to report any colleague who says anything whatsoever that is remotely dodgy. And this is made worse by the proliferation of in-car recording, audio recording, body cams, etc., WhatsApp groups. So there's a positive obligation. If anybody says anything and a third party happens to come across that conversation, even if it's not what they were looking for, you can then be found to be in trouble. For instance, we've helped a North Yorkshire police officer recently who, as a result of a WhatsApp investigation into an entirely separate incident, they came across a meme which she had posted. Again, unbelievable. All it was a picture of the suffragette flag on International Women's Day, and it had got a crease in it, and the comment was, "Could have ironed it." Which is just funny. It's just a funny thing. But she was investigated. She was investigated for sex discrimination and hatred of women because they'd found this comment about a flag in an entirely separate investigation. Now, of course, we won that because, as I pointed out, she didn't say she should have ironed it. She just put should have ironed it. I said the only sexism here is with a person who assumed that she meant a woman should have done the ironing, and so we got her off. But that's where we're at. That's where we're at, and this is why I think that the police officer from Humberside was reported by his colleague for rolling his eyes at the notion of a trans training day and commenting on it, because I think the other police officer would have been aware that there was that the conversation was being recorded in the car. and that any future investigation would, if the car had been involved in an incident and they played the tape, if he'd not been seen to do something about challenging that behaviour, then he would have been in trouble too. So there is a chilling effect right the way through the police, unless if you're in support of Black Lives Matter and to a greater extent the T in LGBT, then you can say what you like. You can put out what you like. For instance, North Yorkshire Police have had on their website, on their Twitter feed for the last 3 years, the complete and utter lie that 1 in 12 trans women are murdered. It's not. There's been one trans woman murdered in the UK in the last 10 years. Not 1 in 12. It's grotesque. Avon and Somerset on their website have a statistic that say that a survey says that 14% of the public personally know a trans person who was murdered. No, they don't. That's not possible. So you can get away with anything if you are espousing the right type of woke ideology. But if you're expressing the wrong type, then they throw the code of ethics at you and apply it to the letter. Whilst at the same time, if your views are woke, they don't apply it at all.
Do they not? I'm assuming they don't, from what you're saying, but they don't support their claims by any data, and
No. When challenged, they say, "Oh, these are American statistics." Well, one, what's North Yorkshire Police doing with American statistics? And 2, those aren't the statistics anyway. They're not even close to being the statistics. There's an exaggeration by, I think I worked it out at 48,000%, something like that. It's just a lie. But you can get away with a lie if you're lying for the right cause. For instance, all police forces, most police forces are very keen to promote this meme, bring your whole self to work. What they mean by that is if you have autism, express your autism. If you're nervous, express your nervousness. Again, I know of a force where a police officer, based on their nervousness, was allowed to take their mom to training school with them. I know of another police officer who was allowed to take a comfort tortoise, have a comfort tortoise in their car with them so that they can stroke it between jobs. So that's bring your whole self to work is fine. If you're a male police officer and wake up feeling like a woman, then you're issued with a separate uniform and a separate number, so you can bring your whole self to work. But if you are a gender-critical lesbian or a gender-critical straight person, and you bring that whole self to work, you find yourself on a re-education course.
And presumably, if you're a Christian and you bring that,
and you're a Christian and you bring it, yes, absolutely. Then you'll find yourself being told that you must operate without fear and favour, and that an expression of your Christian view could cause someone who is not a Christian to question your impartiality. So there is the code of ethics. I was asked by the Home Office about a month ago, what's wrong with the code of ethics? And I said, nothing. What's wrong is that it's not applied, or where it is applied, it's applied as a tool to shut down those views that the police don't like, and it's entirely ignored with regard to views which the police do like.
So what you're calling for actually is just impartial application of the law as it stands, because what your criticism is that we have a surveillance culture and ideological pressure that's overriding the upholding the law as it stands.
That's absolutely right. I mean, for instance, at the High Court in 2019, the usher was wearing a rainbow lanyard. I was like, really? And when one of our barristers, no, not my barrister, a barrister in the audience afterwards challenged them and said, look, really, why do you feel the need to wear a rainbow or lanyard in court, particularly in this case? She was immediately reported to the judge for transphobia. Outside the I think it was outside the CPS. They were flying the rainbow flag. You can do that, but you wouldn't dream of putting up getting away with putting up a suffragette flag, for instance, because they would instantly recognise this as being divisive and trans-exclusionary. You can celebrate Eid, no problem at all, but you've got to be very careful when it comes to celebrating Christmas.
Mm. Point taken, Harry. Yes, thank you. Robert or Simon, do you have any further questions to ask?
Yes, if I may. Can we just go back to the time of your arrest, Harry?
In 20...
Did they? Yes. Did they? They must have searched you, I presume. Physically searched you.
Oh yeah, they did.
Can you just tell us what happened and what they removed from you?
What they removed from me? They removed my phone, my keys. That was it, I think.
Right. And what I mean, obviously, you're obviously very brave in how you're handling all of this. But what can you just say something about what personal impact this has had on you?
Other than being tired, very, 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 very little really. What's the influence is indirect. It's the effect on my family, which then blows back onto me. I'm very concerned about the stress that it causes my family, particularly my stepdaughter, who's a serving officer in Humberside. My daughter in Australia, she gets very, very worried about me and about what I'm doing. And my wife, I think, as on most wives, I think partners, she's perhaps more aware of how hard I work with all this and how tired I get. I think she's more aware of it than I am. So whilst I would say it other than getting tired, it doesn't really affect me, it does indirectly, very much so.
Right. And also, I'd just like to go back to the currently serving police officers whom you're in contact with. Are there situations where they speak in confidence to you about their concerns that, they share your perspectives on how the police are not performing in the right way, how they're not applying the guidance in the correct way? And do they speak in confidence to you to say, this is totally confidential, but this is really what I think?
Yeah, absolutely. We guarantee absolute anonymity. I have said that I would not breach confidence. I would go to prison before I breached confidence. I would not breach confidence. None of us would, and that gives police officers a lot of confidence to speak with us. Now, what we're hoping and what I think is going to happen is that there's going to be a gradual opening up of gender critical expression. That's the hope that I have now, particularly having had a meeting with a bunch of officers only like 2 or 3 weeks ago. So I think officers are getting braver. I wish more officers would contact us. I wish more officers would speak out, but I understand it's very difficult when you're in a uniformed service like that. The pressure to conform is quite overwhelming.
Yes, and I think you've really alluded to this, but perhaps if you can just say a few more comments. What's your sense of serving police officers and whether the extent to which, if at all, they believe this woke ideology? I mean, are they just all conforming, or do you think some of them genuinely believe it?
No, there are some, but I think this is the tyranny of the middle. I don't think there are many chief constables who believe it. 1 or 2 do. I think that the chief constables of, for instance, Merseyside, West Yorkshire, definitely Northumbria, Vanessa Jardine, the chief constable there, she is the NPCC lead for LGBT issues, and she is an absolute utter fanatic. So some do, but I think with most things, I think a lot of this is led by the middle. It's tyranny of the middle. What's happened is that HR departments have scouted around for something to do, and they've embraced every possible cause going, and then they rely on conformity. They manage conformity upwards, and they manage conformity downwards. I think that's what's happened. And of course, these people have an awful lot of say over your careers, really. So they put out an edict, put your pronoun in your bio, embrace this, do that, do the other. If you don't do it, then somehow you're marked out. So I think I don't think there's a lot of belief. I think there is a core of true believers, and then an awful lot of people who just think that conforming is the best way of getting on in the job.
I have just one other question, if I may. I know that you're not currently in the police force, but what knowledge do you have about the training process that police officers have to go through currently, and how LGBT and other woke ideological issues are integrated and embedded into the training program? What can you tell us about that, if you know anything about that?
They're absolutely embedded into the training program. We have an awful lot of documentation written by the National Police Chief Council, endorsed by Stonewall, that's issued to all, as far as we know, all police forces. And in there, you'll find it's just they're just like the Bible of LGBTism. So pronouns are a human right, gender, and whilst there is for instance, I can remember it almost word for word. One of the documentation says that whilst the Equality Act protects those with a gender recognition certificate, or those seeking a GRC, it says most progressive organisations take it much further than that and recognise that gender identity is a protected characteristic. And I go, whoa, you don't get to do that. You can't get ahead of the law like that, particularly as a police officer. You can't say, well, we recognise that the law says this, but we're progressive, so we actually mean it says this. You can't do that. That is not the job of a police officer. The job of a police officer is to A, understand the law, B, obey the law, C, apply the law, and D, enforce the law. It's not your job to get ahead of the law. Now, one of the problems that we have is a residual sense of guilt, corporate guilt, within police forces, where they bought the idea that they behaved badly against old school homosexuals in the past, and they've entirely bought into the Macpherson report's notions of systemic racism, and so burdened with guilt about that they are now desperate to get ahead of any future curve. So in effect, what they do is they get on what they consider to be the right side of history, even though they're not on the right side of the law. That seems to be the case. So they will say that being offensive is an offence. No, it's not. It's never been being offensive has never been an offence. In fact, being offensive, the right to be offensive, is absolutely established in our rights of free speech, as reiterated in as recently as 2019 in the Miller ruling, which of course has direct application to the police. They seem very much to be wanting to stretch any definition of crime so that it fits, and so that they can, if not prosecute, at least take action against errant individuals. I think the worry is that they are unleashing a form of hell against errant individuals, knowing full well that there is no prospect at the moment of any form of prosecution or conviction, and that the process is in fact the punishment.
Thank you very much, Harry.
Just one question, if I may. You described a situation which is very redolent of communist Eastern Europe, and the way Marxism was kind of imposed on the peaceful population of those countries at that time. One of the things that was quite common in those days is that people would be put under surveillance and monitoring and watched. Do you have any experience of this yourself?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think our Twitter accounts are being watched all the time, not necessarily by the police, but anybody can now become a hate crime champion. If you go to, for instance, in Cheshire, the Rainbow Tea Rooms have been appointed as a hate crime reporting centre, and on the wall in there, as part of their training, they were told that ignoring somebody is a hate crime. No, it's not. Ignoring somebody is not a hate crime. We challenged Cheshire Police on this. Well, they were told that I was out as I lived out of the area. I had no standing to make a complaint. But that's the police are using third parties, places like the Rainbow Tea Rooms. But also, I successfully applied to Staffordshire Police to become a hate crime champion. You'll be pleased to know. And I was awarded with hate crime champion status just this last week. They clearly haven't done their homework and worked out who I am. But I'm very much looking forward to finding out what my role as a hate crime champion is going to be. I imagine what it will be is trawling through Twitter, listening to conversations, and reporting back any form of errant thought or speech. And of course, this is precisely what happened in East Germany, where I think there was something like one spy for every 20 members of the population. I think it was something like that. Anyway, some ridiculous proportion like that. And this is what's happening. The police have subcontracted their hate thought crime reporting to willing members of the public. And this is absolutely what happened in Berlin. And this, by the way, I think is why Mr. Justice Knowles reminded the police that we had no Stasi check or Gestapo. Many people think that he was being hyperbolic in order to get a headline. Well, he did get a headline, but I don't think he was being hyperbolic. I think he saw the direction of travel. I think he saw just how dangerous this was. He just didn't quite have the cojones at the time to denounce and class the guidance as unlawful. He left that to the Court of Appeal. But yes, this is where we're at. This is where we're at. For instance, the lesbian in Newcastle, the police were operating on the basis of a hate crime group, the Newcastle United LGB network, who had been trawling through members' accounts in order to find instances of wrong speak, passing it on to Newcastle United, who then passed it on to the police, who then acted. It's an absolute terrifying network of police citizens who are being enrolled into this.
Yeah, needs a new law, I think, to stop this, possibly. But
I think it does. I think it does. Yeah.
Okay. What about yourself? Have you had any evidence that you've been people have put you under direct surveillance, but not just members of the public, the police been listening into you, or anything like that?
I've no direct evidence of it. I mean,
Yeah.
the police know full well, who I am.
Yeah.
I think by and large they're going to leave me alone because they don't really want to get on the wrong side of me and Faircop, because we've got like 60,000 odd followers now, and we've got, well, until recently we had the Home Office and Elon Musk retweeted us the other day. We're a fairly substantial group, but I attended Leicestershire Pride in September, and I didn't really disguise myself at all. I just sort of picked up a flag and waved it a bit. But when I went to the stalls in the park and just tried to have some chats with the police there, I was very quickly pounced upon by a police officer who said, "We know who you are. Nobody's going to talk to you." So yeah, they're very aware. They're very aware.
Thank you very much.
Thrilling and interesting. I had thought that all the police forces were now supposed to have severed their links with Stonewall, but clearly this hasn't happened from what you're saying. But
no, a lot have. There's been a sharp reduction in police forces leaving the Champions scheme, but not all of them have. And even if they've left the Champions scheme, then the influence of Stonewall 100% remains with the police LGBT, the LGBT police networks, who then themselves have an awful lot of sway within policing.
Okay, well, Harry, thank you for giving a most compelling testimony this morning. We are envisaging that this inquiry is going to last around 2 years, and we will be presenting a report to Parliament at the end of that time, calling for proper application and adherence of the law. Because like you, I think our perception is that the laws actually in this country are quite strong, but they're being misapplied so often these days. But we will be putting forward that report in 2 years' time, and there will be an interim reports over the course of the 2 years. So we will be obviously referencing your testimony in this. We may possibly have some further queries, having talked amongst ourselves afterwards. So we may possibly come back to you just to ask for clarification on
That's
a couple
fine.
of points.
Yes, I'm yours. I'm on yours. I'm on your side. I want this as much as you do. Anything that I can do to help, just give us a call. I'm at your service.